Hello friends, welcome to today's session. We are going to talk about under the shelter of Thornbush. Here are some questions before we move on. What comes to your mind when you think about a king and his countrymen? Question number 2. How does a ruler impact his people? Pause the video and talk among yourselves. Today's story is taken from the book of Judges. This book paints the picture of a world that's sordid or nasty or broken place completely. We are talking about those days when there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This is why some of the most horrific accounts of sin find their places in this book. But God did not leave them. He would intervene by punishing them with exiles. And later, he would rescue them by raising some charismatic leaders. Gideon was one of those leaders who defeated the Midian army successfully. The elders of Israel tempted Gideon with position, power, and prestige. They said to him, "Rule over us, both you and your son, also your son's son. For you have delivered us from the hands of the Midianites." But Gideon refused, saying, "I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you." After the death of Gideon, the nation went away again from the Lord, and God's judgment was looming in the air. Gideon had 70 sons. Abimelech, who was one of them, was born to one of the concubines of Gideon. He was madly ambitious to be the king. So he got his 70 brothers killed on one stone as they were before him in line. But the youngest son, named Jotham, escaped and fled to Gerizim. And when he heard that the people of Shechem had made Abimelech the king, he stood up there in Mount Gerizim and spoke this parable. It's taken from Judges chapter 9, verses 7 through 15. When Jotham heard about this, he climbed to the top of Mount Gerizim and shouted, "Listen to me, citizens of Shechem! Listen to me if you want God to listen to you. Once upon a time, the trees decided to choose a king. First they said to the olive tree, 'Be our king.' But the olive tree refused, saying, 'Should I quit producing the olive oil that blesses both God and people, just to wave back and forth over the trees?' Then they said to the fig tree, 'Be our king.' But the fig tree also refused, saying, 'Should I quit producing my sweet fruit just to wave back and forth over the trees?' Then they said to the grapevine, 'Be our king.' But the grapevine also refused, saying, 'Should I quit producing the wine that cheers both God and people, just to wave back and forth over the trees?' Then all the trees finally turned to the thorn-bush and said, 'Come, you be our king.' And the thorn-bush replied to the trees, 'If you truly want me to be your king, come and take shelter under my shade. If not, let fire come out from me and devour the cedars of Lebanon.'" This is God's word. Let me ask you questions to revisit the story again. Who is saying this parable and to whom? Jotham, to the people of Shechem. That's correct. From where is he saying this parable? Where? From the top of Mount Gerizim. That's right. Who decided to choose a king? The trees. Correct. Which tree did they go to first? And what was his response? The olive tree. That's correct. What did he say? Should I quit producing the olive oil that blesses both God and people just to wave back and forth over the trees? That's right. Which tree did they go to next? And what was his response? The fig tree. That's correct. What was the response? Should I quit producing my sweet fruit just to wave back and forth over the trees? That's correct. Where did they go next? And what was its response? Grapevine. That's correct. And what did grapevine say? Should I quit producing the wine that cheers both God and people just to wave back and forth over the trees? That's correct. Which tree did they go to finally? And what was its response? They went to a thorn bush. And what did the thorn bush say? Well, if you truly want me to be your king, come and take shelter in my shade. If not, fire will come out of me and will devour the cedars of Lebanon. That's correct. Well, I would suggest you spend some time with this story as a family or in a group or even if you are alone. You could read together again this story. You could memorize and share among yourselves. You could do a role play on this story. You could write a song based on this story or even draw a picture. Do whatever you feel like doing to enjoy and relish this story before we get into meaning and application of it. You can pause the video now. You have 5 minutes. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the story and the story has been printed in your heart and you would be able to share with anybody now. Let's get into the meaning of the story. Here is a question I want you to wrestle with. What do we learn about the trees seeking to be under a king so badly? You can pause the video now. Jotham's story is a crypto parable, as somebody said. The trees personified by Jotham talk about the people of Shechem, who were so badly in desire of a king that nothing stopped them from having one, no matter what kind it was. Seeking for a king means to come under the subjection, protection, provision of a ruler. But nothing comes without a cost. The cost of freedom, independence. One has to be obedient, available, and submissive to the king, and live for him, and be at his disposal anytime. So these people wanting a king badly means they wanted to come under somebody's subjection and wanted to be ruled by somebody. Here is the second question I want you to wrestle with. Why is asking for a king a God-offending demand? In other words, why is God offended when people ask for a king? You can pause the video now. We alluded in the introduction that Gideon defeated Midianites with just 300 men. God had asked Gideon to turn away 22,000 men just so that when he gives them the victory, they would not boast that they won the battle with their own strength. That means God was their leader, their king, their commander, and he wanted them to acknowledge that. After the battle was over, instead of giving God the glory, they wanted to lift Gideon up as their king. The Gideon had not only wisely turned down the offer, but also affirmed that God alone would remain their king, their ruler. Thus, demanding for another king while one king is already there is a rebellion. And getting out of God's will in life is not less than a rebellion. God has always wanted to be the king, the protector, the provider, and the guide of all of us. He has never altered his desire anytime. He was, he is, and he will be the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Thus, bringing ourselves under the influence or subjection of anything where God is ruled out and not depended on is offensive to God. Man was originally created to subdue the earth and to rule over every creature in this world. So he was originally created a ruler, a king. But after the fall, the man lost his kingship and became a subject to sin and evil. Henceforth, no man born of a woman is free. The fallen man is a slave to someone or something by default. Here is the second question I want you to wrestle with. Think of some of the things or the persons the people of this world have made kings over them. You can pause the video now. Anything man is addicted to has taken a place of God in his life. Because in that case, a man is not under the control of God, but under the control and influence of that thing he's addicted to. It is the addiction and not God that dictates his life in that case. So addiction to anything could be making that thing our king. Phone, internet, even coffee, TV, misuse of social media, or drunkenness, even work, money, pleasure, pride, jealousy, smoking, drugs, indulgence, tobacco, even if anything, when a person is addicted to that thing is ruling over his or her life. Okay, those were the addictions that the people of this world have. But let's come back to the believers now. Here's the question for you. Think of some of the things or persons we the believers have made king over ourselves. You can pause the video now. The book of Romans chapter 6 verse 12 says, "Therefore, do not let the sin control your mortal body, so that you obey its desire." So the believers are also susceptible to come under the control of the things of this world. Tradition, even denominational pride, flesh, worldliness, fear, unbelief, unforgiveness, secret sins. There are so many things that we the believers could be under the influence of. And if that's the case, our king is not Jesus, but whatever rules over us or dictates its term over us. Let me lead you to the next question. What do we learn from the 3 trees that rejected the offer? You can pause the video now. They approached these 3 trees first. The olive tree, the fig tree, then the grapevine. Though it's not a tree, but for now, let's keep that in this category. What qualities you see in these trees that the trees asked them to reign over them? They did not go to any other tree. In fact, in this story, verse 14, if you see, all the trees turned to the thorn bush. That means there was none among them beside the thorn bush who could be an option. So what was special about these three trees? The first one, the olive tree. We know the olive tree is known for its fatness, its abundance, because the people of this world would easily be ruled by extravagance, consumption. Wanting to be ruled by the olive tree means making an idol of materialism or even of riches. The next tree they asked to reign over them was the fig tree. Jared C. Wilson, in his book, The Storytelling God, he says the fig tree serves the Jewish mythos as the national symbol of safety and security and of stability. We see this symbolically in the prophetic shade the fig tree offers in 1 Kings chapter 4:25 of Micah 4:4. Remember also that it was with the fig leaves that Adam and Eve sought to first cover their shame. So the trees crying out to the fig tree to reign over them means seeking ultimate hope in temporary safety, protection, and peace. You know, when you read in Jeremiah, he says there are false prophets who cry out, peace, peace, where there is no peace at all. So there are so many things in this world which we the people could take shelter of, like money, name, fame, anything that seems to give us some temporal relief. We consider them to be our king. So that's fig tree. The trees next ask the vine to reign over them. The vineyard and its grapevine are symbols of national abundance and fruitfulness, of luxurious provision. This also talks about running after profit, enjoyment, entertainment, indulgence, and sometimes something that makes our heart delighted for now. The olive tree, the fig tree, and the vine all decline the request made to them. All these symbols talk about the people requesting Gideon and his sons to be their king. But all of them declined their request with valid reasons. And if you see the reasons of declining this request, like olive tree said, I can't leave my fatness. The fig tree said, I can't leave my sweet fruit. And the vine said, I cannot stop producing wine that cheers both God and man. Each of them knew the purpose of their existence and wanted to stick to that. They knew their remaining useful was more important than their becoming great. Which one will you choose today? On one hand, you have a chance to live meaningfully, but you might not become great. On the other hand, you have a chance of becoming great, but you can't be meaningful. Do you want to be great but useless? Or do you want to remain small but useful? You decide for yourselves. Here is the next question I want to lead you to. What do we learn about the Thornbush from this story? You can pause the video now. Bramble or thorn bush is nothing but a dry and thorny bush. It's an invasive and offensive weed. It's suitable for nothing, but only for the bonfire. And this thorny bush says, come and take shelter under my shade. It says, come, I will take care of you. Shade of a thorny bush? It's all the empty words, false promises. Thornbush, in the beginning, always thrills, but very soon it pricks and kills. You remember the serpent, how it was a well-wisher of Eve in the Garden of Eden, until it showed its true color? You remember the tempter devil coming to Jesus and saying, the whole world is mine, and if you bow before me, I'll give them all to you? Anything you name promises the thrill in the beginning, the satisfaction, the enjoyment. But no, their promises are always like the clouds without water. No matter what it promises to you, at the end it turns back, shows its true color, and bites you. The bramble not only promised, but it also threatened. It says, come under my shelter, if not, the fire will come out and will consume even the biggest trees of cedar in Lebanon. Anything that we get into in the beginning seems to be giving us pleasure, enjoyment, entertainment. But very soon it shows the real color and we become a slave to it. To Thornbush, calling these people to be under him, to come under his shade. And so friends, when you come to a thorn bush and say, please take me under your shelter, under your shade, what does that mean? In Hindi, there is a proverb that says, "Ah, bel mujhe maar." That means, oh, bull, come and hit me. That's what we do. We come under the shelter of thorn bush without knowing what's going to happen at the end. This is what exactly happened with these people. Just 3 years later, Abimelech killed this whole people with fire. So this was not only just a parable that Jotham spoke, but it was prophetic that just was fulfilled in just 3 years of time. I want to invite two kinds of people today. Are you running after any kind of brambles to reign over you? Nothing satisfies you. Money, pride, name, indulgence, gossiping, etc. You cry out for a king, and Jesus answers the call. For all who will trust in him, he is the eternal provision and everlasting security. He is the vine, and all else is bramble. Would you accept him today as your king and as your Lord? My second invitation is for the people who have already asked Jesus to be their king. But we live a life of a rebel. While he is on the throne, we look for other things to reign over us. Our hearts are desperate for another king. We tend to make an idol of nearly everything. None of us are free. Either we are a slave to God or slave to sin. There is no middle path. Spend a few minutes before the Lord and let him run his X-ray machine through our hearts. If you want to invite him for the first time to be your king and your Lord today, do that. If you want to reconfirm your allegiance to him, saying nothing else will reign over you except for Christ, do that right now. Spend some time in prayer as we conclude this session. God bless you.